G'day everyone, welcome to this recording of Free Kick on air for week 6. And I think it's a joy and relief for everyone involved. I've got an actual member of Free Kick on with me today, Jono. Nice to have you back. How are you?
Yeah, no, it's good to be back. Good to be back. Doing well. Took me about an hour of traffic to get here, but I'm feeling excited. I feel like this week has started well.
Yeah, well, it has started relatively well. At least there's been a couple of popular trade-ins who've had banging first quarters from the double week games and then have subsequently gone and disappeared. But I think we can probably discuss some of those. Whilst we wait for teams to come out, I was thinking maybe just up front, let's just have a quick chat about who we've traded so far this week. Then maybe we'll have a quick discussion of the games that have already happened and how the double week's going. And by then, it'll be 6:20 and we'll have a whole host of, I'm hoping not carnage, just mild entertainment when we get teams for Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah, no, sounds good. So where are we starting then?
Yeah, we'll start with you. What are your trades been this week?
Yeah, so I've gone with Sinead Goody up to Prasparkas, Georgie Prasparkas, who I think a 70 so far has been a little underwhelming, but, we'll see how she bounces back against Sydney. To do that, I went Dana Finn down to Alicia Pisano, and then I ended up taking Campbell sideways to Georgia G, which, a 43, it was okay. I think I'd expect more against the Gold Coast, but we'll see.
Yeah, that one, there's definitely a few things to talk about that. So my trades were, I've gone with Mon Conti up slightly to Laura Gardner. I went Sinead Goody to Mattia Breed, and then Dana Finn down to Caitlin Thorne. I'm quite happy with Laura Gardner's performance. I think 109 is probably what I would have expected. Maybe I could get greedy and ask for more, but given how few players there are averaging over 100 this year, I think that's pretty good output and just a hair above what she's been averaging. Mattia Breed, much like Maddie P, had been on a tear in the first half.
That first quarter was incredible.
Oh, she was absolutely everywhere. She nearly, I think she might have even doubled Charlie Rowbottom, who'd been my VC. And then a little bit quieter in the second. But the thing that really killed it was kind of an ankle roll in the third quarter, which meant that, she spent most of the third quarter off and also had given away 2 free kicks right before she'd done it. And then had managed to come back on in the fourth, had done okay, but then seems like she's rolled her ankle right towards the end and apparently has left the game in a moon boot. So we're probably going to find out at teams whether or not she's even going to play in the second game. So that would be disappointing. I think she scored roughly what her break even was, maybe even just a hair above. So I don't know if I'm going to have lost cash, but part of my reason for trading her was a break even of 48 or 49. I was kind of hoping to be able to make some cash to make a sideways trade possible next week to someone else on their double game. So that may not ultimately be what I'm able to do.
Yeah.
Just having a quick discussion of the games. Did you get a chance to watch the whole Geelong Fremantle game?
Not the whole thing, unfortunately. But from what I had seen, I mean, Freo just seemed all over them.
Well, they were all over them in the second half, that's for sure. I think the thing that was interesting, the first half, probably the slickest, and this is probably actually true of Geelong a lot of this season, some incredibly slick ball movement. They were getting width from stoppage really, really well. Zali Friswell was killing all of the Fremantle wings. Georgie Prasparkas would have had, I reckon, 200 metres gained in the first quarter, getting lots of deep entries inside 50, and Geelong just couldn't put Freo away on the scoreboard. They had like 3 goals, 9 before, or something ridiculous. They were incredibly inaccurate in the first quarter. And then kind of as Fremantle kind of settled and we heard it a bit when there was a cut to Lisa Webb at three-quarter time. They talked about the fact that they were really trying to stop the game from getting any width from stoppage. So they clearly identified the fact that it was kind of Friswell, Crockett Grills, Georgie, and Nina Morrison were all killing them once they got kind of width, like left and right from each stoppage. And we're just trying to keep the game all nice and close. So it's certain. I think that was definitely part of the reason behind Friswell's slower than expected scoring after a huge first quarter. And then as for Georgie, I think part of it was the game plan, but I also think she just tired in that second half, and Fremantle just ran over the top of them.
Yeah, it does seem that way. I mean, looking at the scores, you can see it's all the outside ball from Geelong at the top there.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting game, but again, so hot and cold from Geelong, which has been pretty much their curse of this season. So it's going to be fascinating to see what kind of team they name for Sunday. I definitely think there's a world where there may be a few more magnets swung around. I did think, though, that Beck Webster had a really good game, really consistent, shown herself to be a very, very good player to have started the season with, and also a good upgrade target this week.
Yeah, I wonder how Geelong's now looking at the rest of their season, because they've got one win and one draw from their first 6 games. They're now quite a ways back from the finals race. I wonder if they're looking at whether or not they're going to be able to make it, or if they've given up on that dream.
They probably do have to consider whether or not they're going to make it this season. But I also just think that given the fact that they've had so many performances where they've been up and down in the same game, I would imagine a world where Dan Lowther says, we're not completely shutting this season down. We need to try and build some momentum into our off-season and show that we can actually play the way we were at the back end of last year. And they are kind of injury-riddled to a degree in some of their key spots. And I don't think they have the ability to kind of throw the magnets around as much as you'd probably like. Someone like a Darcy Maloney, yeah, she's getting some more midfield minutes at the moment, but she's also playing forward just purely down to the bodies that they've currently got in the team, and some of the they're quite old and not exactly, high game getters. Someone like a Mel Bragg, he's having to play games at the moment just down to those injuries. So I'm fascinated to see what kind of team they name this week, but I think they're just a big watch generally for possibly some changes around, or if they're just going to keep trying to win and put together a full game performance.
100%.
Moving across then to Hawthorn and Gold Coast, I'm assuming you've watched this game, but I think I would just want to say is the difference between a completely, normal weather game versus a wet game versus a wind game is so obvious when you watch something like Frankston last night.
Yeah, the wind is unbelievable down there. And it was just like in that second quarter when the Hawks had it, all the ball down there and it completely swaps in the next quarter. It's just it's rather frustrating, to be honest. I'd love if we could get in Marvel sometime just to have the high quality game, because playing at GMHBA, that was an incredible game when you could sort of see the skills they've got when it's not just blowing a gale the whole time.
Yeah, I think just the location itself, it's so close to the water. I think if anyone that's watched any VFL or VFLW footy and you watch games that happen at Williamstown, which is basically on the water's edge, the football changes completely. And I think that kind of showed in the very lumpy scoring for Hawthorn and Gold Coast players. So obviously, Mattia Breed had an amazing quarter first up. But I would also say, someone like an Eileen Gilroy, who had some big quarters and then completely disappeared in others. It was very much down to how easy it was to lock the ball completely in one area of the field because of how strongly the wind was blowing just the ball almost backwards at times. Yeah.
I like that Charlie Rowbottom just keeps getting it done every time, because, it must be hard on a team that's not had any wins, and yet she's still putting up captain-worthy scores for us every week.
She was. She gave me a bit of a fright in the first quarter. I think she'd already had a bench stint, and she was on 3 with about 4 minutes to go. And then in the last 30 seconds to a minute, a couple of tackles, couple of kicks, runs back around, gets up to 17, and then just was off to the races from there. Like, she was probably a bit overzealous as well with her tackles, holding on a bit long. But she was also, I think she might have had 3 or 4 holding the ball free kicks given to her. She is just an indomitable force.
Yeah.
I would dread to tackle kind of the equivalent player of whatever league I'm playing in because, she's just dominant.
Yeah.
I was also pretty happy with the performance of Daisy Darcy. Definitely looked like, I can definitely say she benefited from the inaccuracy of Hawthorn because she has a complete, domination over kick-ins. Mm-hmm. But her kicking is pretty spectacular, and she also lays some pretty decent tackles as well. I just wanted to ask you, you got asked on Bale's stream earlier this week about Eliza West, and you're like, I feel like she might get a 60. She really popped off in the second half.
Well, that's the thing. I feel like she's either on or she's off, right? And it's very much these huge scores or she's a little bit south. So, but she's an incredible player, and I do think she was underutilized at the Demons, where they had just had so many players at the time that could run through there, and she was getting such limited time on ground.
Yeah.
But, the Hawks, we're running them through a full time. We're actually almost running out of players that can do the role she does, because, we've lost Casey Sheriff. I think Mattia Breed is a good chance to miss this weekend. So she's just going to be getting more and more time.
Yeah, and, I definitely think that there's a bit of a game plan thing at Melbourne. I definitely feel like, there's some very important kind of key things that, you are trying to get handballs away from stoppage. Don't try and search for certain players in the midfield. It's a very team-oriented speed on the ball system, which definitely hampered her scoring. And so, it's been great to watch, like her tackling and even the goal she kicked last night. I think there are some definite similarities in her rise at a new club, as we saw with Ashley McCarthy, who's someone we probably should have mentioned when we were talking about Geelong Fremantle. Definitely someone that we've kind of seen bursts of fantasy relevance from before, but probably relegated them to maybe not. Like, they're a bit inconsistent and they don't have the big enough ceiling to, oh, wow, they really can put it all together for a full game at a new team.
Yeah, yeah.
And then moving across to just Stressenden's finest. I saw that on Twitter today. Thank you, Danny. Someone referring to the Bombers as Stressenden, and I'm like, yes, that is a very, very accurate depiction of what goes on when I watch the Bombers and manage to eke out a win.
I feel like that game was sewn up so far into the last quarter, and then suddenly just keep you on your toes.
Like, the Bombers should have kicked 3 goals in that last quarter. Elise Gamble drops a mark, at the edge of the goal square. We had another one, another mark dropped about 25 metres out directly in front. And then the final bit was we had, who was it? I think Amber Clark just had to chip it into Georgia G and couldn't get it to her, and then the ball was just rolling away from her, and then tries to kick it off the ground, fresh areas. It was just like, oh, come on, we're so much better than Sydney for so long. How are we going to lose this? And then they got a clearance right at the end, and I'm going, of course, this is just Gold Coast and the men's team all over again.
Yeah, and I feel like Sydney's the sort of team, once they're ahead, their backline is very good at holding the line. That would have been a nervous wait had you had to pass them again.
Yeah, that would not have been entertaining. So in terms of just the scoring, I would have said that we got, as I said earlier, as expected from Laura Gardner. She's a pretty spectacular player. She just always manages to get to the next stoppage. I honestly think I'm just watching Ash Riddell every game, or just the second coming. And then I think very interestingly, and it's something that I kind of flagged, was Tanya Kennedy definitely did a job on Maddie Prespakis. And when Maddie kind of got off the chain, that was the best quarter that the Bombers had. But then, outside of that, really did struggle to get that much going. So I know that she was someone that definitely people were looking at bringing in this week. I definitely think that Kennedy is going to keep getting tasks like that, because she also had a good game independent of that and definitely got some clearances. I do just think we need to flag that going forward. So I think there's a definite watch on whether or not Kennedy gets some kind of role on G-Prez on Sunday.
Yeah, I can see that just mainly on the fact that there's not, unless she's tagging Nina Morrison.
Which I think is also a possibility because Morrison's been more consistent.
Yeah, I mean, if you think Prasparkas is going to tire anyway based on the fact she's been unfit and out of the team, that could be the option. But I would almost expect Sydney's midfield to back themselves against Geelong.
Yeah, I think that's possible. You might start off the game like that. I just wonder if it's something that they continue doing. If at any point Geelong look like they're getting ahead, I think Kennedy just gets, break glass in case of emergency treatment, to be honest. Just a couple of other players to talk about from that game. Sophia Hurley is a jet.
Yeah.
An absolute jet. And probably should be talked about more. Her ability at stoppage, she's so fast. And also isn't easily bodied off the ball either. I was very impressed watching her play. I know you started the season with her, Johnny. You must have been, slightly soured in going, this is what I was wanting the whole time.
No. She was the pass through where I had Anderson, would have been fantastic. Then it was Hurley, would have been great, and then it was Benici in the end. Which
right.
Yeah, the laid out there threw me into Davey, which has killed my season. But I'm looking at Hurley. I think she's been, aside from a couple early games, she's been very consistent, which I'm looking at as maybe a strong option for next season.
Yeah, potentially. I just would want to see the consistency, and obviously they're going to re-add Chloe Malloy into that team, and it's a wonder what she could do when she returns. And then obviously this game as well, there was no Montana Ham, who has had some CBAs at points. So it's going to be an interesting watch. Some other ones, I will just say, big role shift for Ella Heads. She was playing on a wing almost this entire game, had a massive last quarter, but that was almost entirely from work inside 50 and kick the goal too to bring the game really close. So that was a big watch. And there was far less chipping the ball around in the back line. And I didn't necessarily talk about it too much on the episode this week, but I put out a bit of a tweet with some of the comments from Scott Gowans, and it definitely seems like there was a shift from Sydney to avoid doing that. I don't think it was appreciated how much they'd just been looking for switches and looking to try to control the ball inside their own D50 and then it going awry.
Yeah. I've been curious because I'd seen Ella Heads was named on the wing, but, with the hijinks that the coaches play, I just didn't expect it to come to fruition. But I guess with maybe Collier coming back, Brenna Tarrant coming back, kind of makes a little bit of sense.
It makes some sense, but to be honest, I'm surprised that it's Heads that goes to the wing and not McAvoy. And admittedly, McAvoy did play higher up the ground in the last quarter, but that certainly was an interesting one for me. All right, we now have some teams that have been named. So starting off with Friday, Adelaide have dropped Brooke Tonnen, Rochelle Martin and Taylor Levy and brought in Brooke Boileau, Denny Varnigan and Kira Mueller. Out for St Kilda is Nat Exon and Nicola Zenos, which is bad for both you and I, Jono, for a keeper league that we play, which they are both key forwards for us. And then we've got Janome Anderson and Nat Plain. Moving across then to the Saturday games, we've got the Kangaroos and the Western Bulldogs. So out for the Kangaroos, and this was something we knew already, Emma Carney and Kate Shearlaw. In come Eliza Shannon and Taylor Gatt. Out for the Western Bulldogs, Ellie Bennett, Georgia Borg and Christy Lee Weston Turner. And in come Naomi Ferrers for her first game of the season. Zimale Farquharson and Annalie McKee returns after a fairly extended stay on the emergency list, which is sure good for people that probably started the season with her and haven't had a chance to chat her out. Now, for Richmond and Collingwood, Richmond out are Laura McClelland and Stella Reid, and in comes Sarah Hosking, and to a big surprise, Katie Brennan has been named to play, which is a big shock given that it sounded like she had a bit of an ankle injury, and given her history of those, I'm a bit surprised that she's actually been named. And then for Collingwood, we've got Jordan Ivey, Grace Campbell, Sarah Ingram and Charlotte Blair out, and in come Lauren Butler, Bree Davey, Imogen Evans and Amber Shute. For the next game, West Coast and Port Adelaide. Out for West Coast, Octavia Di Donato and Verity Simmons. Di Donato is someone that I believe people are still running
on field
on field at D5. And in come Sasha Goranova and one of the hottest defenders before they were out in Jade Britton. And then a singular change for Port Adelaide, Sachi-san out, and in comes Jasmine Stewart. All right, I've got to keep reloading. Hopefully more teams have come through now. All right, and then we've got Carlton and Brisbane. One singular out, and it's Celine Moody. Just when I thought I was going to have a fully green dot bench, it's suddenly disappeared, and in comes Lila Gant. And then for Brisbane, out are Orla Otwaya and Luca Yoshida-Martin, and in comes Sophie Peters and Ellie Hampson. Moving across to the Sunday games. First up, we've got Gold Coast and Essendon. There's only a singular out, and that's Wallace Randall. And then income or named Elise Barwick, Katie Lynch, Cara McCrossan and Kira Bisher. Now, of those, Katie Lynch, Kira Bisher, Cara McCrossan have all been named on an extended bench. And then for the Bombers, big in, Lily Rose Williamson, Emily Goff, and then just this little-known person called Bonnie Toogood has been named to play, which is a fairly rapid return given the injury that she had. I was expecting maybe round 8 or round 9 we might have seen Bonnie. It's a 6 to 8 weeks, and she is back in 5. So that's a very impressive return. Bonnie has Goff and Williamson have all been named on an extended bench. Definitely something we're going to talk about later with that one. Sydney and Geelong, no outs for Sydney. In come Paris McCarthy, Lauren Spags, Sageti, and then Eliza Vale. Sageti, Vale, and McCarthy all name extended bench. And then for the Cats, sadly only one out, and it was debutant Bridie O'Rourke, who looks like she's done a shoulder injury. And then in come Chantal Mason, Bella K. Smith, Georgie Rankin, and Brooke Plummer. Now, all 4 of them have been named on an extended bench. And then final game of the round, I'm going to start with Hawthorn. Sadly, Mattia Breed out alongside Bridie Hitwell, and then named in Louise Stevenson, Christy Stratton, Sophie Locke, Hayley McLaughlin and Charlotte Baskarin. Just having a quick look through here, all 5 of them have been named on an extended bench. And then no outs for Fremantle. And then we've got Joanne Craig, Talia Mulder, and Michaela Tuakarana, all named extended bench. So all in all, not too much carnage, except for the one that I've traded in, because of course it is. Such is the way of my season.
Well, yeah, not ideal. Are they on field for you?
Mattia Breed. Yep.
That's wonderful.
Of course she is.
Yeah.
Yep. That's.
I was thinking Bridie O'Rourke, but yeah.
No, thankfully not Bridie O'Rourke.
Yeah.
I had Caitlin Thorne instead, thankfully. Yeah. So I've been saved that. So you're just thinking about kind of some of the main things that we've had come out of this. I would say that Bonnie Toogood is probably the main point of discussion. And I know that might seem like it's Bombers tinted spectacles on, but
yeah, I think they're
pretty big.
Yeah, I like this a lot because, for one, she's locked right now. We can't trade her in, so we get a week to look at it.
Agreed.
And her price is also
going to plummet.
Yeah. So we could be picking her up at 600K or 700K.
Yeah.
Maybe not that far.
I think it also it means that I don't have to answer any questions. Oh, do I bring her back in straight away? Because you can't. It's easy. And I do think it gives us, most importantly, a look at her role, because I think that was the big shock, even before she got injured. Where she was playing was deep in the goal square and not really getting up nearly as high up the ground as she had previously. Now, the Bombers in that time have actually been persisting with such a role, and now it's either been Elise Gamble or Amber Clark who've been playing that role, and neither have scored particularly well. Now, Gams has scored okay because she's actually been kicking goals, but Amber Clark can't get near the ball or score anything. So I think it'll be interesting to see, A, what her role is, but then also, ancillary to that, her time on ground, because I expect that, given the injury that she's had, she will either be in a degree of discomfort or probably will have deloaded and may not have her typical high time on ground aerobic fitness.
And I feel like I would worry if she was sitting deep, because you've still got North to come and you've still got the Tigers to come, and that could be very tough games if you're not floating up the ground.
Yeah, I think particularly that Richmond game, that was probably Bonnie's worst performance last year, and that was matched up against Gabby Seymour, who at the time
is more of a full-time defender now.
Yeah, who at the time was only playing there because she was injured and couldn't really ruck that much. I can't remember what the injury was, but they were like, well, you're semi-fit. And this was at a time when I think there were at least two top-up players playing for Richmond. So they were like dregs of the roster. And so they played Gabby Seymour in defence. And so it's definitely going to be, a dangerous trade. But I think in a couple of weeks, maybe by week 9, she's someone that we look at.
Yeah, for sure.
It's
a cheap way to fill out our forward lines with premium players,
Yeah, but I'm not suggesting that it's a lock at all. I think it's going to be interesting to see. Another name that really jumped out at me from the Saturday games is we've finally seen Lauren Butler named to play.
Yeah.
About 6 weeks after it would have been really helpful.
Yeah, no, 100%. They're almost back to a full strength midfield now. They've got Brie Davey, they've got Britt Benici, they've got Michaela Can. I assume Ruby Slasher is going to go back to that defensive role that she was playing earlier in the season. So potentially anyone still holding her, unless she starts intercepting marking, which she hasn't been doing this year, it could be a move on time.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think it's just a question of, you've probably not done it already this week if you hadn't previously. Or if you haven't done it yet, you're kind of locked into her. That's, an unfortunate reality. It will be a big watch on how Collingwood play, because I do think that they're a competitive football team in there. They just need healthy people playing.
Yeah, absolutely. The other one that I think is interesting is looking at some of those players that are a cut below the rookies that have been filling in. So Maureen Atkinson has been getting a good look in some games. Carly Ramos has been getting a good look in some games. Grace Campbell's less likely to get the big minutes she's been having.
She already lost them last week too. With the return of Can and Benici, she was full-time forward.
Yeah. I was wondering if that was a lingering injury, because you remember we were at that West Coast game and she was limping so much, and ever since then she's been on very limited midfield time.
Yeah, and she's also just looked hurt, and I've seen her getting a few rubdowns on the boundary kind of multiple times in game. So it definitely didn't seem like she was fully healthy. So, yeah, it's going to be fascinating. Going to be fascinating to see what Collingwood look like. I expect them to be more competitive. They now no longer have any I don't think they've named anyone who was previously a train-on player. So clearly things are looking on the up and up for them.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think, was there any other big ins or outs that you wanted to discuss or that popped out to you?
Not really. I guess Eliza Shannon coming in for Emma Carney, to me, is the most one-for-one they could have done.
Yeah, and I think it was kind of the perfect time for it too, because Shannon was injured for the first month of the season.
Yeah, the timings worked out okay under the circumstances. But I think, to me, how North end up moving that ball off that half-back line is going to be an interesting watch this weekend.
Yeah, I fully agree. I expect to see a more prominent role from each of Bresnahan, Birch and O'Shea. Yeah. I don't think it's going to be one person, because I think all of those three bring different qualities.
Yeah,
I think kind of Birch probably reads the play the best. I think Bresnahan is the best kind of in and under player and kind of matches the style of play a little bit of Carney. And then O'Shea is the speed and the kind of direct straight line attacking, trying to get involved in handball chains, because Emma Carney can kind of do all things for all men. When it comes to what defender you want and need for your team, it's a big out for them. But I think of all teams capable of covering it, it was probably North.
Yeah.
Because they were already struggling to fit all their defenders in. Shannon wasn't playing, even though she was an every-game player last year. And Tess Craven has had to become a winger because they just didn't have room for her in defence.
Yeah, no, they just carry so much talent, that team. Seriously impressive.
Yeah, it's I do envy the completeness of their roster. So on to something else that I wanted to discuss, and that's we've obviously got trade targets for next week to think about, which means that to be perfectly, like, for me, you and I are going to go to this game tonight. I'm going to be laser focused in on some of the options that have the week 7 double game week. I wanted to query if you had any couple of players in particular that may not be the most expensive, so probably not talking about Ebony Marinoff or Anne Hatchard or Chelsea Randall, that you were trying to see or you were kind of thinking you might have an extra eye out for this weekend.
Yeah, so I think the first one is Maeve Chaplin, because I think she's been crushing it the last couple of weeks, but it's been against teams who have, really thumped them. Talking Essendon last week when she put up that 75. Tonight's against the Giants. I don't expect that result, but I think the following week they play Adelaide first up, and I think that Adelaide game, I expect the ball to be in the back line a lot, and I think she'll do well. But it's in that second game. I think they have a much easier matchup, and I want to make sure that she can still score in both games. So that's one that I'm keen to see what that role is.
Yeah.
And then it's probably Isabel Huntington, just because I think she'll be an achievable forward. And if she's getting a lot of intercepts still and really looking at home in that role, then that's one up forward that I'll probably regret not getting this week when I grabbed George G.
Yeah. I think G is probably going to benefit in the next game. I just think of the style of game that was played last night. But, yeah, I'm definitely going to be looking at Huntington, definitely going to be looking at Maeve Chaplin. I think the other one that I'm probably just going to watch out for is Danielle Ponta, probably a smidge below what she started the season at. I just feel like if I can see kind of maybe a 50 or a 60 this week, she may be someone that I'd take a stab on, just given her ability to pop a huge score. Mm-hmm. It's nothing particularly ideal, but I've kind of partially resigned myself to the fact that I'm not going to be able to afford the uber primos in any position after what's happened to Atia Breed. The other one as well that I'm going to be watching tonight specifically is Megan Fitzsimon. She's had a more consistent role the last few weeks, had a 55, a 71 and a 58. I definitely feel like she's someone that she definitely has the capability to put together 270s. So if I see the high half forward / wing / maybe a bit of midfield role that I'm hoping for, she's definitely going to be someone that I'm targeting. And the other one that I was going to name, or the other two who are right next to each other, is Nikki Zenot and Nad Exxon at 670 and 660K. But they've not been named.
Yeah, which is fascinating.
Maybe they'll come in extra fresh, but it probably is going to scare me out of going with them, to be perfectly honest. Another one to throw at you that we're going to be watching this evening, they're coming into a bit of better form. Last 3 scores of 48, 53 and 60, and it's Georgia Garnett. Yeah,
I'm a big fan of Garnett. I don't know if I'm going to be willing to go there. And this is almost on a similar basis to what I was looking at. There's another player that I was looking at on the Saints team, which is Hannah Priest. We finally got the marks back last week and put up a 97. And I was thinking, as soon as they can get away from RSEA or something like that, maybe that mark kick game can propel her up as well. But I believe next week it's on the Tuesday, it's the Saints and the Giants in Kinetic Stadium in Frankston, which we've just seen the wind down there.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it's not ideal.
14 people rock up to that game as well.
And then they're back at RSEA Park on the Sunday against the Demons. So it's just it's a challenge on those windy conditions for a player that relies on marks, and I think Garnett is one of those players.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. I hadn't actually considered that, but I was just like, look, I'm going to probably be shopping in some bargain basements here. I need to start thinking laterally, and definitely has the pedigree. And then,
absolutely.
Garnett has St Kilda and then Adelaide.
Yeah.
So it's less than ideal. I wanted to throw another query at you. I think there is one position group at one team that will probably sum together to be the most traded in players this week. And it's the midfield at GWS. So we've got Parker, Beeson and Goldsworthy. There's a little bit of differences in them in price. Just give me a second. I'll pull them up. We've got Beeson at 1.14, Parker at 1.05, and then Goldsworthy at 901K. If you had to name straight up who you thought you'd be most likely to trade into if you're doing a midfield trade, who would it be?
Oh, it'd be Parker every day of the week.
Yeah. Even though Goldsworthy's 150K cheaper.
Yeah. Yeah, I really rate Goldsworthy, obviously, but I think Parker's the one who's got the history of putting up consistent high scores.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. Although I do think that it would be remiss of me not to spruik for Beck Beeson on behalf of Will, who I know that would definitely be doing the same. I feel as though her score against the Gold Coast Suns, where she had a 118, may have just been a little bit of an outlier. Because outside of that,
she was enormous in that game.
She was incredible in that game. I definitely feel like that might have been a little bit of an outlier. I feel as though that Parker is definitely the most likely, but I will say this up front. I have extreme interest in Elise Parker. I had her last season in my team, and it was a game against St Kilda at RSCA when she broke her ankle and then missed the rest of the season. So it would be very in keeping with the rest of my season if I were to trade her in for such an inauspicious kind of fixture, given what happened last year. But yes, I definitely think that Parker's there. What surprised me for her this year is how she's had some real dips, particularly against the Suns. 100% time on ground, only 63 points. Whereas versus Sydney, she did cop some attention from Tanya Kennedy and only scored a 69. And I think at this point, I'd say that Tanya Kennedy's probably the most limiting tag in the competition, particularly with Lucy Single not tagging at the moment.
Yeah.
I do think that, I think we all know that Elise Parker is at some point going to be 100-plus averaging midfielder. It's just going to be if she's in the right setup at GWS to be able to do it. She's still only 24, which is wild given how long she's been such a consistent player. I am just a little bit concerned about her floor scores so far this year, particularly for someone over $1 million.
Yeah, it's a fair concern because it's not as if she can't have had less opportunity. She can't have had more opportunity than what she's getting in that midfield. You know, they're basically only running those three through there with Eilish O'Dowd, and no one else is getting more than, 20, 30%. I think Caitlin Surhoy and Michaela Pauga are occasionally in there. Yeah. And I suppose Pauga is due back. So, that might take these numbers down a fraction, but it'd be a fraction.
I think, yes, I agree with you on her ability to be in the midfield. My concern is more with the game plan in general.
No, but that's my point, right? Is it this is the best she can do under this game plan at the moment? Oh,
yes, sorry, I hear what you're saying.
So it's it's not as if there's more opportunity for her coming. This is just what the role is, and that's what's frightening a little bit.
Yeah, it is a little bit concerning, but I still think that there are pop scores available, and given kind of what you can expect from someone priced just over $1 million. It's somewhere in, I think the high, actually I can pull it up for you, but I believe it's somewhere priced around the 80s. If you were to get a 95 and 100 across a double game week and you traded Parker in, I don't think you're exactly disappointed, is my thinking.
No.
She's priced at 80.9 and she's a break even of 80. I think the St Kilda matchup is ideal for someone like her. Like, I think she particularly down at Kinetic Stadium. That, windy, slightly sloppy, frantic football is something that she's excelled at in the past. So she's definitely high on my radar. Before we move on to some listener questions, is there anyone else from next week that you're thinking of as a trade target?
There's not anyone from next week, but there's one player that I've been looking at in the teams that I have been announced tonight that I think is fascinating, and it's that Tess Lyons has been named as the Rock again.
Yeah, and I think for good reason, because she was spectacular, albeit against Eilish O'Dowd, who is, as I said with DC, a part-time ruck, part-time winger. She's not really a dominant ruck at this stage.
New to the game still, but with that break even, if I had a trade left and I wasn't sure which rookie to be picking up, I'd be jumping on Tess Lyons immediately.
Yeah, particularly of the players who aren't on the double game week, Lyons is intriguing because she's 27. She's got that mature body. She's got that experience at Waffle W level, which, as we've seen this year with what Emily Fiedler's been able to do, is no crappy league. Definitely able to score some points. So, yeah, I think she's a fascinating trade-in. All right, so I'm going to pull up some listener questions. All right, one here from Eloise. Currently have a full primo midfield, Noffy, Riddell, Rowbottom, Gardner and Ali Anderson. Which player would you be most happy trading to a second double game week mid next week, and which one would you target?
That's a good question. So I think out of those players, it would probably be one of Gardner or Ali Anderson.
Yeah.
And probably more likely Ali Anderson. I feel like Brisbane have they've done their dash putting their foot down, and I think now they'd be pretty confident in finals. And I feel like Ali is one of those players that
gets up for the big games.
She gets up for the big games, yeah. And I don't think Brisbane have a particularly tough run home.
No, Carlton into Sydney.
Yeah. So I suppose that would probably be the most likely pivot I would go from.
I agree. And I also think, as I was saying earlier, there is a degree of risk that she will see a tag from Tanya Kennedy. And I think for Gardner, as much as Brisbane are by far and away the hardest matchup for mids, it's interestingly enough, that's where Gardner had her 150 and 41 disposal game last year at Springfield. So clearly doesn't mind dominating against a tough Brisbane midfield.
Yeah. And then in terms of targets,
because you've got Hatch as the main one, I think.
Yeah.
And then it's just a question of, on the other end, are you going to scrimp? Are you going to go down to a Lambert, Beeson, Parker, and be able to bring in Chelsea Randall? Because I think that's the second query, is that for Randall and Hatchard, who are probably the two biggest premiums, who are going to be on their double game week next week, I think there's a non-zero chance that one or both of them is rested.
Oh, interesting. Why do you think that? So
I think at this stage as well, Adelaide are probably in a spot where they're guaranteed finals. I think it's a bigger risk for Chelsea Randall, just given her age and the time on ground that she plays. And I think it's fairly obvious that she just carries the random number of niggles every game. She's often off the ground, having whacked her hand or foot trodden on or nose scuffed up for whatever reason. I wouldn't be surprised if Adelaide used it as an opportunity just to get a bit of rest in either the first or second game. And then Hatchard, it's a little bit less of a risk, but I do think there's a non-zero chance because this is the same Adelaide that allowed Hatch to rest in week 10 last year to be able to go and watch Erin Phillips's final game at Port Adelaide. And I think that's in part as well because Hatchard has, she also is someone that it seems like there's times where she is carrying some foot and ankle concerns, but still runs and runs and runs for days. So I think it's a trivial risk for Hatchard, but probably more than some other superstar options to trade in.
Yeah. I was looking back on what some of the other teams have done, and it seems like it's been fairly rare that players have been rested, but there have been notable changes in minutes that they've played. Usually in the first of the two. Yeah, she dropped to like 65% CBAs, a lot lower time on ground, and then swung back for the second game of the round.
Yeah, and even then, she still kind of wasn't looking at full speed. And I think it's been interesting that it's actually, as you said, the first game, because I guess at that stage you go, oh, right, well, we've got this in hand. We want to leave you in a good spot for the next one. We know what your recovery is going to look like if we stop you now.
Yeah.
So we can predict what we'll be able to do in the next one, which is fairly intuitive when you've seen it happen, but it's probably not something that I thought about earlier.
Yeah. So I'm less worried about it being rested. And I think Hatchard in particular is one of those players that, she can score off less time on ground. I know she plays quite a lot. But
forward too.
Exactly. I mean, she already plays half the games forward. So
yeah,
it's not a huge concern.
I do agree with you there. All righty then. Let's just see if there's any other questions. Okay. Well, this is I'm looking through it now. I think this is probably a good one to end on. Not taking this from Neil T.
Yeah.
Not taking into account double game weeks. Who are the top 5 mids for the rest of the season? So a bit of mini Sweet 16 talk here.
Yeah. Which I think we're still a full week out from going into round 8 full time, but it's a good point as we're doing these sideways trades. So I think at this point we're pretty comfortable saying Marinoff number 1. Putting myself out on a limb there.
I don't think that limb is particularly weak. I think that might be an entire log that you're hanging out on there. It's extremely solid. I think the top 3 are pretty solid, to be honest.
Yeah, Riddell and Rowbottom not far behind, really.
Yep. And then it just comes down to our other options. So at the moment, it's Garner, Anderson, Gardner. I was about to say Mim Strom, but that doesn't quite count, does it?
No, we're not used to seeing a ruck this high. Yeah.
Ash McCarthy and Mon Conti. Actually, that's probably, I should give 20 seconds. Bloody hell, Mim Strom is good. She destroyed. She also has an innate ability to only ever rest on the bench when there aren't CBAs happening. Like, she rucks every single CBA, but she still has bench stints. It's incredible.
Yeah.
McCarthy, Conti are the next 2 mids. I feel as though that I would say that it's Garner and then Gardner.
Yeah, I would agree with the only player that I think there's a good chance for Conti to have a good run home too.
Yes.
Because I think she plays a lot of midfields that would back themselves to take her on.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point, actually. Let me just double check.
I mean, her best score this season has been against North Melbourne, and North Melbourne, they don't need to tag. They've got the best midfield in the comp.
Yes,
and that's where Conti got to run free and do her thing. And I think we're looking at the teams they've got left. They still have, let's see, they've got running from the back. Week 10 is Hawthorn. Week 9 is Essendon. Week 8 was... I just looked at this. Melbourne.
Yeah, no, I've got it here. It's Collingwood, Geelong, Melbourne, Essendon, Hawthorn. I think Collingwood, I think they may run some attention with Moncon. I
thought it was Geelong, not Collingwood. Next week.
It's Collingwood this week.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Yeah. Collingwood, I think, might run some attention. I don't think Geelong do. I think Melbourne, if Shelley Heath is playing, will.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but we've also been talking about how Shelley Heath has been needed in other areas of the ground because Melbourne's injury crisis.
I think, yes, but I think it's the injury crisis looks to be kind of waning. I think in a 3-week time, it sounds like they'll have people back. I definitely feel like there wasn't a tag run on G-Prez because Heath was injured. Sorry, not G-Prez, Matty Prez. But I agree that it's probably still a decent matchup anyway. Essendon last night ran a stoppage tag with Georgia Nanscorn and Amelia Radford on Mon Conti. Not Mon Conti, sorry, Laura Gardner. I do wonder, it's something that I'm going to keep watching, kind of what the Bombers do at stoppages, because we've also seen them deploy both Brooke Walker and Steph Kane on as a tagger, as a kind of more dedicated tagger at times. And the Bombers, I think, did a fairly good job on clamping down on Moncon last year. I don't think she had an amazing score. And then finishes with Hawthorn, who don't run them. They just kind of go 1v1, which,
we're head to head.
Given their form, like I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. I think she'll definitely be up there.
Yeah. I've got no complaints about Gardner. I think she's excellent and she's no risk to be tagged or anything.
And I think obviously it would be remiss of us not to mention Hatchard as well, who probably has a couple more 120s in her before the end of the season.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a perfect note to end on. We always like talking about our high-scoring players. Good luck, everyone, for... I'm assuming most people have already made their trades, but good luck for the rest of the weekend. Hopefully there's not too much carnage and chaos. You'll hear from us again early, probably another... We've not actually confirmed it, but probably another Monday release of the podcast with a few more people back, which will be fun.
Yeah.
Not that I'm complaining about DC. I don't want that to come across negatively at all. I very much enjoy podcasting with DC, but it'll be fun to have the regular cast of characters back. Outside of that, please do be sure to follow us on Twitter. Keep pinging the account with your questions. We'll try to get to them when you can. And, you'll hear from us all soon. Cheers.
Good luck for the weekend, everyone.